Okay, welcome to Bulldog Banter and/or Theater. Nick Saban won't be allowed to coach number 2 Alabama from home against third-ranked Georgia per NCAA guidelines. And also, he can't be in the stadium while testing positive for COVID-19. Saban said on his radio show Thursday night that he hasn't had a fever or any symptoms and has still been able to perform all his normal work duties from home. Saban quotes, "I feel great. I don't have any problems." Saban said, "I've been able to do everything that I would do if I were working from the office, whether it's being in meetings, watching film with the coaches, or watching practice film. Have communication on the field, and I could still correct players." He said offensive coordinator Steve Sarkisian, a former Southern California and Washington head coach, will handle the head coaching decisions on the sideline during the game. Now, here's what my question is. Let's say Georgia wins that game. Does that not count as one of Nick Saban's students beating him? Would that not count? Would Kirby Smart not get credit for beating Nick Saban should they win? I guess not, because Nick Saban's not going to coach the team. Alabama said earlier that Saban was evaluated by team doctor Jimmy Robinson Thursday and is doing fine. He is continuing to self-isolate and will remain in the SEC testing protocol while being evaluated daily. When asked if a coach who remains positive could coach from an isolated room at the stadium, SEC spokesman Herb Vincent cited CDC guidelines saying people who are in isolation should stay at home until it's safe for them to be around others. Then there are the NCAA restrictions. NCAA spokesman Stacey Osborne referred to the rules interpretation written by National Coordinator of Football official Steve Shaw when asked about Saban coaching. In an earlier response to the prospect of any coach being in quarantine because of COVID-19, Shaw's interpretation was that coaches aren't allowed to use technology to call in plays or communicate with a team in the locker room. Rule 1411B is very specific and allows only voice communications between the press box and the team area. Therefore, the coach could not call into the press box or the sideline for anything related to coaching purposes, Shaw wrote. He also interpreted Rule 14-11 as a prohibiting the use of computers or other technology for coaching purposes, including any virtual communication with a team during a game. This prohibition will begin at 90 minutes before the scheduled kickoff when the officiating crew assumes jurisdiction of the game and will include the time between periods until the end of the game, when the referees declare the score final, the interpretation read. The 68-year-old Saban and athletic director Greg Byrne tested positive for COVID on Wednesday. Robinson said at the time they were the only positive test in the program. He questioned the rule keeping head coaches who test positive from having an in-game role, saying there's ways to do this where you wouldn't be putting people in harm's way. If you're the head coach, there ought to be a better way to do it, Saban said. I don't know exactly what that is, but there should be a better way. You ought to be able to have some kind of communication with the sidelines. Alabama hasn't disclosed positive tests among players since the pandemic started, but Saban had said Wednesday that they haven't had any indication of an outbreak among players. The Tide is coming off a game against Mississippi, which this week had an undisclosed number of players test positive. New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick, a close friend of Saban, said they spoke recently about how much we've learned of this situation and some of the challenges that have come with it. Belichick said, "I know he's been extremely vigilant and put a great deal of thought and effort into the care of his team and players. He shared that with me." Belichick went on to say, "We talked about things that we've done and we've been helpful and so forth." Belichick said, "I just want to wish him the best from all of us here and the organization." Giants coach Joe Judge is betting on Saban over the virus. He'll probably beat COVID-19, Judge said. He's got a pretty good record against every other opponent, so I'm confident Coach will come through this. So, What that does to the Georgia-Alabama game is yet to be discerned. On Wednesday, the coach, Nick Saban, won't coach the ball game. That's a blow, I think, to Alabama. Well, we shall see. It's just an interesting twist to what's already going to be a very interesting football game. Let's take a look at that game. Number 3, Georgia, and number 2, Alabama, 8 o'clock Eastern Time on CBS. While most of the Week 7 slate leaves a lot to be desired, Alabama, Georgia props it up with a serious game of the year vibe. Despite the fact that Nick Saban won't be on the sidelines due to his positive COVID test, the legendary coach will still hope to improve to 22-0 versus his former assistants, with Kirby Smart looking to finally end that lengthy streak. I don't know if you can count that if he's not coaching. The marquee matchup in this one will see Georgia's dominant defense attempt to slow down the machine that is Alabama's offense. The Bulldogs somehow held Tennessee to -1 yards rushing in last week's win. But Najee Harris will have other ideas after piling up a ridiculous 206 yards rushing and 5 touchdowns versus Ole Miss. On the road, Stetson, Bennett, and the Bulldogs' offense probably won't be able to keep up with the Crimson Tide, so it's on the defense to keep this one close in Tuscaloosa. I think this defense can score some points, they can win the game, like they did against Tennessee. If they can get some turnovers, I think this might be a fairly impressive Georgia victory, but I think it will depend on getting those turnovers, and that's one reason to watch the game. Now let's see, if we don't get turnovers, can Georgia still win the game? Well, they can, because I'm intrigued by the fact that Alabama is ranked 65th in defense. I believe they ranked behind Florida State, who I listened to their little Florida State podcast a couple of days ago, and I listened to it a lot because I like the podcast. They're interesting people. And Florida State, their defense is horrible. They had written off the year because of their defense. Florida State, with a decent offense and a new coach, has pretty much written off this year because they can't stop anybody. But they're ranked ahead of Alabama. How can Georgia not have some benefit to this defense they're playing being ranked below Florida State? That's what it is. It ranks below Florida State. That doesn't mean they're as bad as Florida State could be. Florida State's defense is a mess. It's a train wreck. Alabama's defense is not a train wreck, but it has allowed the numbers that a train wreck has allowed. So I don't think Georgia's offense is going to struggle any more than they did against anybody else. They're playing the 65th ranked defense. Georgia's defense is going to put some pressure on the Alabama offense. So it's unlikely they'll just continue to roll against this defense. If this defense can add a touchdown or so on a turnover and get 2 or 3 turnovers and make them all count, Georgia can certainly win this football game. So Alabama, being the 45th or 65th, near the bottom of defensive arrangement last week.
68 yards.
That was Ole Miss, a 68-yard touchdown against that Alabama defense. So, of course, Mississippi's actually a pretty good offense, so that doesn't mean Georgia's going to have that kind of success. Here's a 75-yard drive.
The Rebels like to go very quickly. Another play fake, another open receiver. Nice move through the open field by the tight end. Kenny Yeboah all the way down inside the 5-yard line to the light of the 16,000 here tonight. About yards per catch coming in. Corral makes the run, has a man open. It's Yeboah for the Ole Miss touchdown.
So Ole Miss was able to attack the Alabama defense. They got some really good-looking receivers in that Ole Miss team. Now here we got some Georgia highlights here. You know, recapping the Tennessee game, Stetson Bennett threw two touchdown passes, ran for another score, and number 3, Georgia bounced Tennessee. They bounced back from Tennessee's goal line stand on the final play of the first half and dominated the final 30 minutes to beat the 14th-ranked Volunteers 44-21. Bulldogs 3-0 knocked off a ranked Southeastern Conference team for the second week in a row, shaking off a 21-17 deficit to completely wipe out the Volunteers over the final 2 quarters. Showing it's still not ready to compete with the league's top programs, Tennessee turned it over 3 times and managed to 71 yards total offense in the second half. Fittingly, Justin Garantano was sacked on the final play of the game. Bennett ran for a 10-yard touchdown in the first half, hooked up with Karis Johnson on a 21-yard scoring pass in the final minute of the third quarter, and sealed the victory with a 1-yard touchdown flip to 305-pound nose tackle Jalen Carter, who was supposedly in the game as an extra blocker. For good measure, Monty Rice stripped the ball away from Garantano and scooped up the loose ball, ran 20 yards for a fitting epitaph to Georgia's defensive dominance as darkness fell over Athens. Bennett, the former walk-on, making his second straight start, completed 16 of 27 for 238 yards. Jackson hauled in 4 passes for 91 yards, and Zamir White added a 1-yard scoring run. Tennessee seemed to have all the momentum at the end of the first half. The Bulldogs drove inside the Vols 1 and had 2 shots to ram it into the end zone, inserting Carter to provide another massive blocker at fullback, but Tennessee stopped White short of the goal line on 2 straight runs. Charging off the field in celebration after the second stop ended the half. All those good feelings evaporated when Tennessee turned it over on its first 2 possessions of the second half. Garantano was sacked by Aziz Ojajara and coughed up the ball. Under heavy pressure, a Tennessee quarterback wobbled one up that was intercepted by Eric Stokes, and Tennessee's defense held Georgia to a pair of field goals after those miscues, but Tennessee offense just couldn't get anything going. Tennessee led after a wild first half that included plenty of mistakes by both teams. Garantano hooked up with Josh Palmer on 2 touchdown passes. And the Bulldogs started the parade of arrows on the second snap of the game, which soared over Bennett's head while he was lined up in the shotgun. Bennett couldn't corral the ball at the 1, and Tennessee's Kevin Bennett fell on the ball in the end zone for a touchdown. Now the takeaway from that game, Tennessee, an 8-game winning streak was snapped, and Coach Jeremy Pruitt was denied a much-needed victory over one of the conference top programs. The Vols' rebuilding job still has a way to go, at least when it comes to competing for an SEC East title. The second half debacle is going to sting in Knoxville for quite a while. For Georgia, Bennett had some shaky moments, but certainly did enough to show he deserves to hang on to the starting job. The defense is truly special, so the Bulldogs should be able to compete with most teams, as long as the running game can produce some yardage and Bennett doesn't make any major mistakes. Now, for coming up next for Georgia, they wrap up a brutal stretch against 3 ranked SEC teams when they travel to Tuscaloosa for what could be one of the games of the year against number 2 Alabama. Now, a lot of people looking at Georgia thought they would be at a loss by now. I know many pundits did not think they would get through this first 3 games unscathed at 3-0, but they did. And I think most people thought Tennessee would be the stinger. And after that first half, you would be in agreement that this might be a tough game. I was smelling the South Carolina game last year at that half and was feeling a little pessimistic, especially with Tennessee getting the ball in the third quarter. But 2 turnovers changed that really quick. So a football game has its own personality. You never know what's going to happen once they kick it off. But Georgia, the biggest question for Georgia is going to be playing a good road football game. They're going to have to play a good SEC road game. And they need to just do that. And I think it might come out well for the Bulldogs. So now we bring in our venerable expert, Larry Munson, to give us his take on the Alabama-Georgia game. Larry, what's the game going to be like?
Well, the Dogs are going to go on the road and try to knock off a number 2 team and also beat a Nick Saban team in something that Georgia has simply not been able to do. Mark Richt may have got one off of him, but it's been the nemesis, and Georgia's going to have to just man up and just go out and play a tough SEC road game. What they can't afford is to play a bad ball game. They can't afford to have snaps go over to Bennett's head and have easy touchdowns in the beginning like they did last week against Tennessee. They were able to come back by shutting down Tennessee, but will they be able to shut down Alabama? I don't know. We'll see. Georgia will have to be able to run the football. There is no question that they'll have to run the football. But if they can run the football and shut down that offense just a little bit, I'm still thinking they're going to have to score something on that defense. That big defense is going to have to get some points on the board and some turnovers if Georgia's going to walk away with a win. Now, and there's also the intangibles of Nick Saban not being able to coach the game, or at least we're not sure. That's a day-to-day thing. He might pop up on the field on Saturday and be the head coach, and you know he's had plenty of input into game preparation, so that may not even be a story by game time. But right now, Georgia's going on the road to play an Alabama team that isn't coached by Nick Saban. And the last time that happened, they won.
And now, Bulldog banter and theater goes to Crawfordville, Georgia, at the General Store. And as Larry Munson famously said, I ain't seen no high heels in Crawfordville. But Crawfordville is the pulse of the Bulldog Nation, the part that's not hooked up to Metro Atlanta, the old school of Bulldog followers. They sit on the
rocking chairs in front of the general store, and they talk about them Georgia Bulldogs, Gray and the Judge. Stays up next. Well, Judge, it looks like going to be kind of an interesting Saturday. We got to go out to Tuscaloosa and play the Alabama team. What do you reckon we going to do out there, Judge? Well, Gray, I reckon we'll play a football game. I reckon I wouldn't be putting no pennies and nickels on any of it. Well, we got to go play Alabama and Florida. We got to play LSU. Gotta go play the LSU. You reckon LSU's as bad as they've been looking, Judge? I don't know, Gray. I reckon LSU had to replace a lot of stuff. I reckon they'll be able to beat Florida, though. Wouldn't that be something, Judge, for Florida to go down and have 2 losses? That just might demoralize them a little bit. The old damn Mullen done got them all cranked up now about filling up the stadium, and oh man, he might have messed up there, Judge. You can't be messing with them face masks, folks. They get right picky back when you start messing with the protocol. But I reckon old damn Muller know what he's doing, Judge. He always does. Let me tell you how it's going to happen, Judge. We're going to beat Alabama, and Nick Saban ain't going to get no credit for it because he wasn't there. They're still saying Kirby Smart can't beat Saban. I think he made that up just so he'd have an excuse. What do you reckon, Judge? Well, Gray, I reckon if we beat them, it'd make a good story. Otherwise, I don't know why anybody would do that, Gray. I don't see why they put themselves in a situation like that. I reckon it's just coughing up the real deal. Maybe the man really got it. Yeah, I expect he'll get another test for Saturday. I expect to see him on the sideline, Judge. I really do. But old Gus Malzahn got a tough game in South Carolina now. I believe that's going to be a good game right there. I believe South Carolina is going to beat old Auburn. I don't think Auburn got much this year. Old Gus done lost too much. He manages to put a recruiting class together that's kind of decent for what he needs, but I don't see old Nick's having much help right there. The offensive line ain't helping him none, and he ain't really got none of them jackhammer receivers like Mississippi does and all the rest. I expect old Auburn going to probably have a tough time this year. I believe South Carolina is going to beat them. We'll see, Judge. We'll see. They got Mike Bobo over there on South Carolina. I reckon old Muschamp doesn't got him an offense now, so that'll liable to be something. Anyway, we'll see directly, Judge. I reckon we'll just listen to that on the radio. Ain't no point in driving out there for all that mess. All right, welcome back to Bulldog Banter and Theater. We got the big game against Alabama. Larry Munson seems to think that we're going to be okay. The defense is going to have to score. I agree. Yes, we will have to run the football, but I think what we'll have to do is to be very balanced on offense, and we will have to be able to keep the passing game into the mix. And I don't know how much those numbers are going to actually be reality when you look at the Alabama defense. On paper, it's a defense that Georgia should not be intimidated by. But those things don't always translate. There's still some quality athletes all over that field, and it's unlike other defenses ranked where Alabama is ranked on the numbers. I think it's a lot of potential for Alabama to play a great defensive game, and that certainly could be the question. But you got to do what you do well most of the game. What Georgia has to do well with this team structure is run the football. Now, if Bama shuts down that run, Georgia's going to be in some serious trouble. And also, we don't know if all of those playmakers on that offensive side can be held down. So Georgia's going to have to score points. But they managed to do that against all their opponents so far. Even though the offense was not spectacular, they still managed to get points on the board. What I see the key to Georgia's victory is going to have to be balanced. They'll have to play a balanced attack. And that means the passing game will have to be a factor, but they will also have to run effectively. I keep looking at that defensive stats that Alabama's showing up. I do believe Georgia can get in the 40s in this game, and I think if they can do that, I think they can win the football game. I don't know just how the pace of this game is going to go. Mistakes and turnovers could decide momentum early, and Georgia could have one of those days like they had in LSU a couple of years ago, or they could go out and execute and win a very important game. But the reason I mentioned this game is, what does that really do for the championship picture? Let's say Georgia loses almost with no fight, where it's a big Alabama victory. Does Georgia still belong in the playoff picture? I don't think it matters. I think if they play a close game, they certainly will be. If Georgia wins, obviously they're still in the playoff picture. But it's coming down to the same old routine that we have the same 5 or 6 teams that will eventually fall into the playoff picture. Georgia, in my opinion, even losing to Alabama, looking at the rest of their schedule, the only thing that would be troublesome, according to what we could tell, would be the Florida game. And we'll know a lot more about that game as we see how Georgia plays this Alabama offense. If Georgia's defense can slow Alabama's explosive offense down considerably, become a defensive factor, then I also would bode that they could do the same against Florida. Both those teams are similar, and they could score a ton of points, and their defenses have not been spectacular and have almost been a troublesome sore for the team. Now, Florida's defense seems to be a little more in trouble than Alabama's. And I think Alabama, just with the personnel they have, is going to have a fairly decent defensive effort, and Georgia's offense will have to really work for almost anything they get. I do think a Georgia victory most likely will have to have some scoring from the defense. But one good thing is, it looks like this team is developing that sort of attitude and that sort of capacity to change ball games, to get turnovers that matter and turn the tide of football games. One thing they certainly have had that they didn't have last year is a pass rush, and that could be something to watch. I'm excited about this game. I certainly hope the game lives up to my expectations, and if so, it's certainly going to be a football game worth watching. Let's certainly hope so. And now we go to the just a little recruiting note. 4-star offensive lineman Mims commits to Georgia. Georgia's 2021 recruiting class received a boost Tuesday when offensive tackle Amaris Mims announced his commitment to the Bulldogs. The Bleckley County High School product and native of Cochran, Georgia, is the third-ranked offensive lineman and the 19th overall prospect on the ESPN 300. He chose the Bulldogs over Alabama, Tennessee, and Auburn. And analysts believe Mims, who's listed at 6'7" and 315 pounds, can make an immediate impact for Georgia. Mims is the third offensive line commitment this cycle, joining guard Dylan Fairchild and tackle Micah Morris. Now we take a look at Saturday's top games. Each Friday we will preview the best matchups in college football. Here are the top 7 games to watch in Week 7. Obviously, number 1 game is number 3 Georgia at number 2 Alabama. That's 8 p.m. Eastern Time, CBS. While most of the Week 7 slate leaves a lot to be desired, Alabama-Georgia props it up with a serious game of the year, despite the fact Nick Saban won't be on the sidelines. North Carolina at Florida State. Now, given the respective programs' histories, many would assume a matchup between North Carolina and Florida State, featuring one top 5 team, would see the Seminoles ranked. This isn't the case in 2020. Mack Brown's 5th-ranked outfit boasts one of the country's top offenses, with stars Sam Howell and Michael Carter coming in rolling. The Tar Heels scored at will against Virginia Tech last week, piling up an incredible 656 yards of total offense. And don't expect that to stop this week in Tallahassee. Florida State showed signs of life versus Notre Dame last week, but is now 0-3 against Power 5 opposition with a combined scoreline of 110-63. We've seen nothing this season that would suggest the Seminoles can keep pace with the Tar Heels on Saturday night. So this one, staying close would be among the biggest surprises. It's going to be an ugly day for Florida State with that defense, I'm afraid. Louisville at number 4, Notre Dame. Notre Dame is quietly turning in one of the most impressive starts to the season, posting a 3-0 record with a 27-point average margin of victory. Next up, Louisville, which is 0-3 versus Power 5 competition this season, is fresh off a 46-27 loss to Georgia Tech. While the battle between the Fighting Irish defense and the Cardinals quarterback Malik Cunningham will be fun to watch, Notre Dame's offense should put this one away comfortably out of reach. The Cardinals ranked 63rd out of 76 teams in points allowed this season and are near the bottom of the ACC in rushing yards allowed per play. That doesn't bode well with Notre Dame's Kyrene Williams and Chris Tyree both averaging 7.5 yards per carry. Unless Louisville can stop the run in the South Bend, it could be a long afternoon for Scott Satterfield's program. Number 11, Texas A&M at Mississippi State. The reward for number 11 Texas A&M after upsetting Florida last weekend at home is a trip to Starkville to face Mississippi State, which is coming off one of the worst offensive performances in recent memory. Kellen Monde was brilliant in his first top 5 win of Jimbo Fisher's tenure last week, but the Bulldogs defense should give the senior quarterback a much tougher time than the Gators did. Mississippi State's pass defense ranks among the best in the SEC, and without Caleb Chapman, the Aggies could struggle to move the ball through the air. On the other side of the ball, KJ Costello and the Bulldogs turned in one of the poorest showings for a Mike Lynch offense in the storied coach's history with his air raid offense, since setting the SEC's single-game passing record in the season opener. Mississippi State has scored just 14 points across 8 quarters, with Costello throwing 7 interceptions over that span. This matchup with the Aggies defense, which is allowing over 10 yards per completion, could be just what the doctor ordered. Pitt at number 13, Miami. That's noon Eastern Time on ACCN Network. All the hype surrounding Miami entering last week's game at Clemson died quickly as the Tigers absolutely dominated the Hurricanes from the jump. The normally high-powered offense had no answer all night, barely topping the 200-yard mark for total offense for the game. while Pitt isn't exactly the softest of landing spots. The Panthers come in off 2 straight heartbreaking 1-point losses. The Panthers entered the campaign expected to boast one of the ACC's best defenses. The run defense has certainly held up to its end of the bargain, but the secondary has looked very ordinary of late. The last 2 games have seen opposing quarterbacks both top the 300-yard passing mark while throwing 7 combined touchdowns. Keeping Derrick King and the Hurricanes in check through the air will likely decide this contest in Miami. So, not a huge amount of big games this weekend, dominated by the Georgia-Alabama game, and I kind of keeping my eye on that Miami game. I really think Pitt's going to take care of business there, and I really think we will see just what Miami is as the weeks and the season unfolds. And now it's time for a very special segment on Bulldog Banter and/or Theater, where we trash talk. So who are we going to trash talk today? Well, you've always got Gus Malzahn. He's always going to be a subject for trash talking. Mike Leach is always interesting in the SEC. So how are our favorite trash talk subjects going to perform this weekend? Well, obviously, Gus Malzahn is everybody's favorite when you're picking on a team. Now, look at the Auburn Tigers. They're 2-1. They're 10th in the West. They got a win against Arkansas, and people are going to forget how cheap that was. Auburn has a battle on its hands on Saturday in Columbia as the Tigers take on South Carolina, a tough defense led by Will Muschamp. But neither the Tigers or the Gamecocks have had much rhythm on offense so far this season, excusing South Carolina's 41-point effort against a depleted Vanderbilt team last week. This game could come down to who can make the few extra plays on defense, special teams, and possibly from the quarterback position. Here are 3 matchups that will determine the winner of the 13th meeting ever between Auburn and South Carolina. Auburn's pass offense versus South Carolina's pass defense. The Gamecocks have been stingy when it comes to allowing yards through the air, giving up just 234 yards per game, and that's 32nd in the FBS. They've also been getting to the quarterback, recording 7 sacks in the first 3 games. What does this mean? Well, Auburn's offensive line better be ready to show up, or it's going to be a long day for Bo Nix and the Tiger offense. The pass protection was less than mediocre last week against Arkansas, and it's likely that Will Muschamp will stack the box and make Nix beat him. The return of Eli Stowe from injury will help Nix have more options, but if he doesn't have protection, he won't be able to find anyone. Auburn's rush defense versus Kevin Harris. After a tough game in the opener against Florida, 13 carries for 55 yards and a touchdown, Harris has had back-to-back 100-yard outings, including 171 yards on 21 rushes against Vanderbilt. This Auburn defense improved a bit against Arkansas last week, but you better believe the Gamecocks saw what Georgia did to them 2 Saturdays ago by keeping it on the ground. The front line, let's hope Big Cat Bryant is back and we'll have to fight off their blocks and get some pressure on the rushers in the backfield. Punt coverage. Yeah, it's a small sample size, but just 3 games, but the Tigers have been much better on punt coverage this season, allowing just an average of 4 yards on 7 punt returns. The Gamecocks, not so much. On 5 punt returns so far, they've given up 15.6 yards. In a game where it's expected to be close, those extra yards for the Tigers might make a major difference. And let's not forget about Auburn's secret weapon in Jordan Peters. The defensive back has now blocked 4 punts in his career, including last week's that resulted in a touchdown. So what's Gus going to talk about? Per the latest at BetMGM, the Tigers are sitting as 3-point favorites over Will Muschamp's side when the two take field Saturday. So the Tigers, 3-point favorites, and we're probably going to hear a lot of excuses from Gus Malzahn. And I think South Carolina is going to beat them. And since we're trash talking Gus Malzahn, I mean, look at what you got with Gus. You got a coach that hadn't lost more than 3 games in the season. Hadn't lost more than 3 games in the season. He's 0-5 against his arch rival. He hadn't won a conference championship, and there's 1-4 bowl games. But congratulations, Auburn. You have Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh, who once again saves Gus Malzahn from being the most overpaid coach in college football. I just enjoy watching Gus's press conferences, and we don't really have to. I don't know why he just doesn't record those things and just kind of run with the same one, because it sounds like a recording. Well, we're just going to have to get better, and we will. We couldn't control third down, and we'll have to get better. We couldn't get them off the field. And it'll always be the same old song and dance with Gus Malzahn. Auburn's pretty much saddled with him because of that contract, unless they can find a way to get out of him. But I tell you what, that guy is coaching Cincinnati right now. Could probably take Auburn all the way. Somebody's going to hire him. And of course, you can't trash talk. You can't have any trash talking in the SEC without discussing Dan Mullen of the Florida Gators. Now, old Mullen blamed the crowd last week for Florida's loss. How can you do that? Dan Mullen. He's on a roll. Let's get back to what he said last week. Sports Illustrated columnist Pat Ford criticized Mullen over the "pack the swamp" comments. Dan Mullen's comments after Saturday's loss to Texas A&M, in which he said he would like to see Ben Hill Griffith Stadium at full capacity, has certainly garnered some national attention. When Dan Mullen started his post-game press conference following Florida's upset loss to Texas A&M, he said the strangest things, even for Dan Mullen. It was strange. He started talking about attendance, and not in response to a question. He went there on his own, traipsing down a well-worn path in college sports, the sore loser trail. Let's look at what Mullen said and then translate what he meant. What he said was, it was a great day of football, great atmosphere out there. The crowd was certainly a factor in the game. I will certainly say that I know our governor, Rick DeSantis, passed that rule, so certainly, hopefully, our university administration decides to let us pack the swamp for LSU next week. 100%, because that crowd was a major factor in the game. So I certainly hope our university administration follows our governor that we're allowed to pack the swamp, that we have 90,000 in the swamp to have the home field advantage that Texas A&M had today. What he meant I am extremely ticked off that we lost. I'm going to deflect that reason why we lost. Ask me about the game, I'll talk about the crowd. And because we have suffered the most horrific of all misfortunes here in 2020, losing a football game, it is 100% reasonable to try to browbeat our university into tossing aside all its virus protocols to help us avoid this calamitous event happening again. That's what he meant. Public health guidelines only matter when they cost us in the SEC East race. If I say the word certainly 4 more times, you know I'm serious. But Mike Bianchi of the Orlando Sentinel wanted to make sure, so he followed up on Mullen's pack the swamp comment, and the coach doubled down. What Mullen said, I absolutely want to see 90,000 in the swamp. The section behind our bench, I didn't see an empty seat. It was packed. The entire student section must have been 50,000 people behind our bench going crazy. Hopefully that creates a home field advantage for us next week, because now we passed a law in our state that we can do that. I want to see our students out there cheering us and giving us that advantage. What Mullen meant. Texas A&M announced a crowd of less than 25,000, and they're lying through their teeth. They're breaking whatever public gathering rules are in place around here, and it's no fair. Because again, it contributed to us losing a football game. Yeah, we gave up 41 points, but I'm going to attribute this loss to crowd noise at a place with a capacity of nearly 103,000. When I say I didn't see an empty seat, I'm exaggerating like crazy, because everyone watching on TV can see empty seats. But I'm trying to use our governor as leverage to create our own super spreader event in hopes that maybe it lures LSU into a couple of false starts penalties next week. That's what he meant. Fortunately for fans of public health, Mullen's Pack the Swamp movement died a quick death, and Athletic Director Scott Strickland said the school will continue to follow its protocol. It will continue to follow the health protocol. School President Kent Fuchs also weighed in on the subject Sunday. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, who sent out a memo last week raising the possibility of monetary fines for schools that don't comply with in-game health protocols, assuredly was not in love with Mullen's comments either. And the state's NFL franchises have completely ignored the scientists' ridiculous declaration that they could fill their stadiums. Florida has recorded 693 COVID-19 deaths in the last week, according to the New York Times, the most of any state in America. Maybe this isn't the right time to pack the swamp. All that said, Mullen's veiled assertion that Texas A&M is putting more fans in Kyle Field than it's letting on is an interesting one. Some people have wondered the same thing about Georgia and Sanford Stadium, although in both cases the speculation seems to be based on little more than guesstimates based on video and photographs. But it's a clear sign of these strange times that a sport that has perennially been known for actively inflating attendance figures might now be deflating them. Now that heat is only ramped up since Florida's game against LSU, which was previously scheduled to occur in Gainesville this weekend, was postponed to October 12th after an outbreak of COVID-19 on Florida's team that left 21 players with positive cases. Mullen's comments were likely little more than frustration following a loss, in which his team's defense struggled mightily. But they brought poor optics on the program, especially given the way events have unfolded in the last several days. But that's what Dan Mullen does.
And now we bring you Uncle Louie, with an S, of course. And Uncle Louie gonna tell you how to bet your games this weekend. Get that bank account ready to be loaded up, because Uncle Louie gonna give you some winners. Well, I reckon that old horse done kicked me hard in the head once again, and I had them visions of sugar plums and scores. I saw the future, just like I always do. That Byzantine tint and those golden marble skies was displaying all these scores to me. And these revelations was remembered almost to the point that I was drinking some of that good old tea that we got on the stew pot there, and I remembered most of what I saw. Let's get down to some serious business here. Last time Cincinnati went over the total. Week 9 of last season, the Bearcats are 8-1 to the under cents, with the average combined score clocking in at just 46.1 per game. The total against Tulsa is a shade lower than that at 44. But this is an AAC tilt, so Cincinnati head coach Luke Fickell, now he ain't going to be there much longer. He'll be coaching Auburn or somewhere as soon as somebody gets an opening. But Coach Luke Fickell bound to dial up a low-scoring game. The Bearcats are on a perfect 6-0 run to the under against conference opponents. Don't be surprised if these teams have trouble putting points on the board Saturday. Navy will score versus East Carolina. Navy is an underdog. It's an automatic lock to the over. Midshipmen have cashed each of the last 7 totals when catching points. Navy should have plenty of success Saturday against an East Carolina defense allowing 6.4 yards per play this season. Pitt as a road dog. Pitt's one of the toughest teams to trust when you need points. Head coach Pat Narduzzi wants to play a slow-paced game and rely on his defense, which usually suppresses the scoring. And expect just that against Miami. It's generally a good idea to play Pittsburgh under the total whenever the Panthers are road underdogs. They've hit 11 of the last 12 in this situation. Not to be outdone, the Hurricanes are 12-4 to the under the last 16 teams they were faced with winning records. And University of Alabama Birmingham, UAB, doesn't get enough credit. Head coach Bill Clark led the charge in the program's reinstatement in 2014. He hadn't looked back. The Blazers have quietly been one of the best bets over the last few seasons. Clark's a scorching hot 16-5-1 ATS the last 22 at home, and 12-5-1 ATS the last 18 as a home favorite. UAB could very well improve these records against a Western Kentucky team that is yet to cover a game in 2020. And when it comes to Duke head coach David Cutcliffe is going down swinging this season. His current roster pales in comparison to the talent he's had in the past, but the longtime head coach still has some juice. And it wouldn't be surprising if he pulls off his first upset of the 2020 season in Week 7. We recommend selling high on North Carolina State in our examination of the bad line of the week. Not only are the Wolfpack getting outgained weekly, but Duke also plays more freely when getting points. Cutcliffe and company are currently on a 31-15 run ATS when they're underdogs, and they have as good a chance as any to win this one outright. Well, those are some of your betting trends. Now, we mostly just pick our hard scores with old Uncle Louie here with them SEC games, because that's really what we're worried about. And we'll get to those in just a minute. Now, as promised, Uncle Lou's going to bring you his SEC
picks of the week. Our top pick was Florida LSU, upon which we have just determined was postponed. But we'll go ahead and give you the breakdown anyway, because there ain't a whole lot going to change between now and when they do decide to play. Florida and LSU, not exactly the Bopsy twins, but both got bad case of the same rash, and that being that the spontaneous breakout of this rash occurs whenever the defense appears on the field for either team. So among that group, it looks like Florida might have the worst defense, but Florida has the better of the two offenses, but both offenses are really good. They're averaging at least 40 points a game. And even in losses, LSU has scored points. So LSU can hang with Florida in that department, and that game is going to come down to the little stuff like who makes the tackle, who breaks the tackle, who gets ejected, just the little things and the penalties, because the two teams equal each other out in badness and goodness. But they have postponed it, and I suppose that's going to probably work in favor of Florida, because if that was played this weekend, they would lose. South Carolina versus Auburn. South Carolina, a 3-point dog in this game, but they're the home field advantage, and they have a monster pass rush. Neither one of those are good news for Auburn, and I see that combination, along with an improved South Carolina offense, makes this going to be kind of an easy win for South Carolina. I'm expecting Carolina to win that in 31-14 or something like that. They're 3-point underdogs. Don't be worried about that. Take Carolina and them points. Kentucky and Tennessee. Tennessee is 6.5-point favorite over this team, and really the Kentucky game is kind of symbolic of Tennessee's problems of late, as in the past, Kentucky would be a gimme win for Tennessee, and when it's back, Tennessee claims they're back. So there should be an easy win over Kentucky. I'm not saying it won't be a Tennessee win. However, I am really thinking this might be a dogfight, but Kentucky's lack of real offensive punch kind of troubles me some. I'm going to go with the Volunteers to win this one in a close one, and maybe not even cover that 6.5. Texas A&M and Mississippi State. Texas A&M's a 6-point favorite. Mississippi State had the Heisman candidate for quarterback. Well, that was just one game. Now he's not even really a candidate for the starting job, but he's going to, I guess, get the start. But they really don't have an offense. Mike Leach's air raid done been shut out of the sky. I don't know what they're going to come back with. I know it won't be enough to stop Texas A&M, just on account that they got way more athletes than Mississippi State. And they don't have Mike Leach's coach, and they don't have the quarterback who was lights out, and now where is he? I say take Texas A&M going away in that one, and they'll easily cover the spread. Georgia and Alabama, it keeps getting different every day, every time I look at it. And, you know, my Homer instincts say pick Georgia in at least a 3-point win. But that game could go any kind of ways. But if Georgia, I believe Georgia's going to win this football game, assuming we don't have some crazy officiating, which you can never assume in Alabama that won't be the case. But if it's played anywhere near straight up and there ain't a whole lot of hijinks, I believe Georgia will get enough offense close to their average. They should get close to their average for playing the 65th ranked defense in the country. They should be able to maintain a 36.0 scoring average. If the defense can help them out a little by scoring a touchdown or getting some turnovers, I think Georgia could win this thing by maybe a couple of scores, maybe. Who knows? I'd say if I was picking a score, I'd say Georgia win it 34-28. Let's see if we got any more conference games we wanted to talk about here. They done canceled the Florida LSU game. I do not understand that. But I suppose with the outbreak they had, it is understandable. Well, there's your Southeastern Conference picks. Not a whole lot of big games, just that big game with Georgia and Alabama. And just for the sake of just watching how the conference unfolds, I'd say pay a lot of attention at that South Carolina game, because South Carolina could be a dangerous football team, as they got a pretty good offense, and I really like their pass rush. And welcome back to Bulldog Banter and Theater. The SEC has evolved into a quarterback league of sorts, so not quite as much as the NFL, but the fortunes of the teams will ride the fortunes of the quarterbacks. Football has just become that way. With the departures of the likes of Joe Burrow, Jake Fromm, and Tua Tagovailoa to the NFL, the Southeastern Conference entered the 2020 campaign with a number of question marks under center across the league. Ahead of the season, there were just 5 returning quarterbacks who had thrown at least 200 pass attempts in 2019. Juniors Miles Brennan and Mac Jones were to assume the reins from 2 prolific passers at LSU and Alabama respectively. Transfers Felipe Franks and KJ Costello were expected to make their SEC debuts. Meanwhile, Georgia reeled in 2 prize transfers between Jamie Newman and JT Daniels. Additionally, high expectations loomed over second-year starters Bo Nix and Kyle Trask, who flashed the year before. Following 3 weeks of thrilling football, there have been some personnel changes, but we've seen a number of impressive performances from SEC signal callers. We'll start with number 14, Ken Seals of Vanderbilt. It's been a rough start for Ken Seals' collegiate career, as the true freshman quarterback has yet to cross the 200-yard passing mark in a game, while Vanderbilt remains winless on the year. Through 3 games, Seals has completed 61.5% of his passes for 411 yards. That's a 5.3 average, with 3 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Expectations were relatively low for Seals entering the year, considering he was a true freshman and going into a bad situation at Vanderbilt, and thus far it's gone as expected. Seals has presented the defense with way too many opportunities to make big plays, as he has recorded a turnover-worthy play on 7.5% of his dropbacks. That's the worst in the SEC and over twice the conference average. Next up on the list of quarterbacks that we must watch is number 13, Jarrett Garantano of Tennessee. Jarrett Garantano kicked off his senior campaign by outperforming his first 2 opponents and leading the Vols to victories over South Carolina and Missouri. However, last week, Tennessee quarterback couldn't muster much of anything against a stout Georgia defense and tossed his first interception on the season in a 44-21 road loss. Through 3 games, Garantano has completed 62% of his passes for 664 yards. That's a 7.4 average with 4 touchdowns to 1 interception. Garantano has thrown a quarterback fault incompletion on 18% of his throws this year, which is nearly 3.5 percentage points more than any of the quarterbacks on this list. Garantano has also made far higher rate of bad decisions. It is 2.8% turnover-worthy play rate for 2019, ranked 25th in the FBS, and it's nearly double to start 2020. Mississippi State's KJ Costello comes in. Is a pro-style quarterback, 4-star recruit out of the 2016 class. Following a record-breaking performance in the Bulldogs' season opener win over LSU, KJ Costello has since fallen back to earth, just as Mississippi State has dropped back-to-back losses. Since throwing for 623 yards and 5 touchdowns against the reigning national champions, Costello has managed a combined 545 passing yards and 1 touchdown to 7 interceptions over the last 2 weeks. Through 3 games in Mike Leach's air raid offense, the former Stanford graduate transfer has completed 66.1% of his passes for 1168 in yards and as a 6.7 average, 6 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. The Week 4 box score sparked some early Costello for Heisman conversations. Though it really shouldn't have, Costello had a solid but not great 75.7 passing grade for that game, partly due to a whopping 4 turnover-worthy plays. LSU's defensive strategy was not what it should have been and made it easy for big plays to arise by sticking with man coverage. Weeks 5 and 6 resulted in 7 turnover-worthy plays while producing just 1 big-time throw. In those 2 games, Costello had a poor 50.3 passing grade. South Carolina's Colin Hill. He's a 3-star recruit, 2016 class for South Carolina, a senior transfer from Colorado State. Must have had some Mike Bobo connections there. Colin Hill has yet to really find his footing with the Gamecocks. South Carolina is 1-2 on the year, and last week's win, Hill only scored on the ground as he rushed for 2 touchdowns and completed 16 of 24 passes for 196 yards. Through 3 games, Hill has completed 62.7% of his passes for 698 yards and a 6.3 average with 3 touchdowns to 1 interception. Hill came over with the Gamecocks offensive coordinator Mike Bobo from Colorado State this past offseason and beat out Ryan Helinski for the starting job. So far, Hill's deep ball just has not been there. He has the 3rd lowest grade on 20-plus yard shots downfield and the lowest rate of accurate deep throws thrown. And the next quarterback we'll be looking at is Auburn's Bo Nix. 5-star number 1 dual threat out of 2019 class, the 2019 SEC Freshman of the Year. Bo Nix looked like he picked up where he left off in Auburn's season opener, throwing for 233 yards, 3 touchdowns, en route to a 29-13 home win over Kentucky. Since then, the sophomore has slumped a bit while failing to throw for more than 200 yards over the last 2 contests. Which the Tigers fell to Georgia but defeated Arkansas. Through 3 games, Nix has completed 56.8% of his passes for 597 yards and a 6.7 average per play, with 4 touchdowns to 1 interception. No quarterback has bailed on the pocket more this season than Nix. He has ended up outside the pocket on 24% of his dropbacks, excluding rollouts, the highest in the SEC, and 13 percentage points higher than the conference average. A lot of this has stemmed from poor pass protection up front. But regardless, Nix has handled it poorly. He has earned a 46.8 passing grade and averaged 3.7 yards per attempt on such throws. Kentucky's Terry Wilson, 3-star recruit, number 2 dual threat in the 2018 class. After missing most of last season with a torn patellar tendon, Terry Wilson has returned to doling out most of his damage with his legs. Through 3 games, the junior dual threat quarterback has completed 61.3% of his passes for 463 yards, a 6.2 average, with 2 touchdowns to 1 interception, while also adding 221 yards, 4.6 average per play, and 3 scores on the ground. Wilson's 6.3 average depth of target is the second lowest in the SEC, and that lack of aggressiveness has played a part in the Wildcats generating positive EPA on 36% of their pass plays, the worst in the conference. Wilson is holding on to the ball way too long at times and settling for a check down. He has shown off his mobility on the ground, though, especially in Week 6 against Ole Miss, when he busted off 5 carries of 10-plus yards on 20 attempts. And that takes us to Texas A&M and number 8, Kellen Monde. He's still there. It's not like he's been playing there for a long time. A 4-star recruit, number 3, dual threat out of the 217 class. Well on pace to set a number of career passing records at Texas A&M, Kellen Monde's senior campaign got off to a slow start in the season opener against Vanderbilt, passing for just 189 yards and a touchdown, as the Aggies narrowly won 17-12 in College Station. Since then, Monde's seen an upward trend in his passing numbers, including his recent matchup against number 4 Florida, in which he passed for 338 yards and 3 scores en route to a 41-38 home win. Through 3 games, Monde has completed 62.6% of his passes for 845 yards and average of 7.9. 7 touchdowns to 1 interception. On the ground, Monde has averaged just 2.5 yards per carry and produced only 2 10-plus yard runs on 21 attempts and has broken no tackles. Through the air, Monde has produced the lowest deep passing grade in the SEC and is one of 2 quarterbacks in the conference with just 1 big-time throw. He is routinely hitting the shallow throws and excelling in the quick game. But if Monde doesn't start hitting some downfield shots, he might fall down this list. Stetson Bennett of Georgia, a 3-star, number 6, pro style, 2019 class. From walk-on to starting quarterback, Stetson Bennett has helped lead the Bulldogs to a 3-0 start since coming off the bench in relief of DeJuan Mathis in his season opener against Arkansas. In the next game, the 5'11", 190-pound junior threw for 240 yards and a score against number 7 Auburn, and then last week recorded 238 yards, 2 touchdowns, and yet another big home win over number 14 Tennessee. Through 3 games, Bennett has completed 63.1% of his passes for 689 yards and 8.2 average and 5 touchdowns. In the first halves of Georgia's 3 games, Bennett has posted a 56.5 passing grade, the worst in the SEC. In the second halves, Bennett has posted a 90.9 passing grade, the best in the SEC. If we start to see the second half Bennett for the duration of an entire game, we might be talking about the Bulldogs like we do with the Crimson Tide. And number 6 on our list, Connor Basilic of Missouri. After dropping back to pass 21 times as a true freshman last year, Connor Basilic has continued to progress through each game this season. While he only completed 50% of his passes for 68 yards against Alabama in the season opener, Basilic threw for 218 yards against the number 21 Tennessee the following week. And last Saturday, Basilic recorded his first career passing touchdown in a breakout performance against LSU, completing 29 of 34 attempts. That's 85%. For 406 yards, 4 touchdowns, en route to a 45-41 win, Missouri's first of the season. Through 3 games, Basilic has completed 71% of his passes for 692 yards, a 10.5 yard average, and 4 touchdowns to 1 interception. Over the last 2 weeks, as Mizzou's primary quarterback, Basilic has been nothing short of impressive. From a clean pocket in that span, he has earned a 92.2 passing grade, leading the entire SEC. Keep in mind, those 2 games are the first 2 of his collegiate career in which he attempted at least 15 passes. If he keeps this up and continues to deliver accurate throws, Basilic may jump a couple of spots on the list. The number 5 best quarterback in the SEC, Kyle Trask out of Florida. He's a 3-star recruit, a pro style from a 2016 class. Kyle Trask kicked off 2020 with a monster day against Ole Miss, finishing with career highs for passing yards, 416, passing touchdowns, 6, completions, 30, and attempts, 42, in a 51-35 road win. In his next game, the redshirt senior tossed another 4 touchdowns against South Carolina, to become just the 3rd player in SEC history to throw at least 10 touchdowns through the first 2 games of the season. Last week, Trask completed 23 of 32 passes for 312 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a 41-38 losing effort against number 21 Texas A&M. Through 3 games, Trask has completed 71.8% of his passes for 996 yards, a 9.7 average, and 14 touchdowns to 1 interception. Trask and the Gators opened up the 2020 season with Ole Miss, and the 5th-year senior had a career day by posting 90.9 PFF grade, but he followed that one up with 2 games that made him look like the Trask from 2019. Over the last 2 weeks, Trask has recorded a 64.1 passing grade, 2nd lowest adjusted completion percentage on throws of 10 or more yards downfield. Number 4, Felipe Franks of Arkansas. A senior transfer from Florida, Felipe Franks has breathed life into an Arkansas offense that struggled to find quarterbacks last season. So far, Franks' only bad game was the season opener against top-ranked defense in number 4 Georgia. Since then, Franks has led the Razorbacks to their first win of the year in an upset over number 16 Mississippi State, and produced last week's stellar performance in a close loss to number 13 Auburn, a game they really did win. Completing 22 of 30 passes for 318 yards and 4 touchdowns through 3 games, Franks has completed 64.9% of his passes, 730 yards, 7.8 average, 7 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. In his first 3 games as a Razorback, Franks had to face a fairly tough set of defenses in Georgia, Mississippi State, and Auburn. Yet he still managed to have the best 3-game stretch of his career, posting a solid 80.8 passing grade in that span. Offensive coordinator Kendall Briles has had Franks use play action on 53% of his dropbacks, 2nd highest rate in Power 5. And on those, he has tossed up 5 big-time throws over 20 yards downfield, most in the SEC. It's been a staple in opening up throws downfield and helped give Franks the 3rd best grade and 2nd lowest rate of uncatchable passes thrown on 10 yards targets in the SEC. Matt Corral of Ole Miss. Entering the 2020 season with 4 career starts under his belt, Matt Corral has looked poised in Lane Kiffin and Jeff Levy's new Rebels offense. So far, having nearly eclipsed all last year's passing stats when he played 10 games, the sophomore signal caller currently leads the nation with 95.6 total quarterback rating through 3 games. Corral has completed 76% of his passes for 1,080 yards, 12.3 average, with 9 touchdowns to 1 interception. Corral ranks 3rd in the SEC in both negatively and positively graded throw rate, which has helped earn the 10th best passing grade in the FBS on throws of 10 or more yards this season. Corral has produced an SEC-leading 155.3 passer rating and 74% completion rate. Over 47% of those throws by Corral were to an open receiver, more than a couple of steps of separation, trailing only Mac Jones in the SEC at over 6% points higher than 3rd. Number 2, Miles Brennan of LSU. While LSU has gotten off to a bad start, Miles Brennan is certainly not to blame. Having to fill Joe Burrow's shoes, the junior quarterback has more than looked the part, including an impressive performance last weekend when he passed for 430 yards, 4 touchdowns, as the Tigers fell 45-41 to Missouri. Previous week, in LSU's 41-7 road win over Vanderbilt, Brennan passed for 337 yards, 4 scores, with 1 interception. Through 3 games, Brennan has completed 60% of his passes for 1,112 yards, 8.5 average, with 11 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. LSU has gotten off to a brutal 1-2 start, but the last man to blame is new starting quarterback Myles Brennan. He produced an elite graded performance above 90.0 in LSU's loss to Missouri this past weekend, featuring 6 big-time throws and not a single turnover-worthy play. That has helped bring Brennan's season passing grade to 88.8, ranking 4th among Power 5 quarterbacks. And number 1, Mac Jones of Alabama. A 3-star recruit, pro-style 2017 class, filling in for Tua Tagovailoa. The last year, Mac Jones performed well, but nowhere near the level he's played at so far this season, leading Alabama to a 3-0 record. In the opener against Missouri, the junior signal caller completed 18 of 24 passes, 75% for 249 yards, 2 scores. The next week against Texas A&M, ranked 13, he completed 20 of 27, 74%, 435 yards, 4 touchdowns to 1 pick. This past Saturday, Jones produced the most efficient game yet, completing 28 of 32 passes for an 87.5 percentage, 417 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Through 3 games, Jones has completed 79.5% of his passes for 1,101 yards, and a 13.3 average, 8 touchdowns to 1 interception. Jones has posted the 3 best PFF grades of his career to kick off the season, resulting in a 93.6 PFF grade for the season. That mark is the best among Power 5 quarterbacks, even higher than Trevor Lawrence. He has displayed pristine ball placement and thrown 82.4% of his passes accurately, 22.5 percentage points higher than the next best SEC quarterback. No one has had more open throws created in the conference than Jones. 69% of his passes have been to an open receiver, highest in the SEC by 5 percentage points. But even on the few throws he's made in small windows, he's been pinpoint. And so, it does look like the quarterbacks do mirror the team's play overall, but not necessarily 100%. Certainly, quarterback play is going to have to be the focal point for most of the teams vying for good seasons, bowl opportunities, and of course, to win their divisions and get to the playoffs. I was a little surprised that when you look at that Georgia is as high as they are, and they don't seem like they're numerically all that far off. It looks like his numbers match a good game manager. So that kind of equals or offsets the fact that the best rated quarterback is going to go against the top rated defense. So that bodes for a very interesting football game. And I don't really know how I would pick that at the moment. Kind of lean to Bama just a bit because of the home field. And I'm keeping it to 3 points for that one. That's your quarterback story. Then that's the situation at quarterback as we return back to picks on the Bulldog Banner and Theater. Thanks for joining us on Bulldog Banner and or Theater, our midweek edition as we get ready for the big Alabama game coming up on Saturday. Could be a big push for either team on their championship drive. I think the game probably means a lot more to Georgia. Obviously, Bama could lose the game and still survive. We'd like to thank Kip Jackson for providing the bumper music on tonight's show. You can check out his YouTube page, Kip Jackson Music, and got a wonderful, he's got some absolutely fantastic music. I encourage you to check out his YouTube page. And thanks again to Kip Jackson for allowing us to use his music on our show.
We'll be back again for one more episode before the game, right before kickoff. Be sure to listen and look out for that on the game day edition of Bulldog Banner and or Theater.